Tonight, we know where the weapon came from that was used to shoot down flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine. But who gave the order to fire? I'm Brent Goff, and this is The Day. Recreating the scene of the crime, investigators today showed the world how flight MH17 was shot out of the Ukrainian sky. Mass murder at 30,000 feet. The weapon made in Russia.
And that conclusion is that on July 17th, flight MH17 was shot down by a Buk missile shot from a farmland in Pervomaiskia, and the system was brought in from the Russian Federation territory and returned to the Russian Federation afterwards.
En nadien daar weer naar terug is gebracht.
Cell phone chatter revealing panic. Men afraid the missiles and the mission had been traced. Russia denies any connection. Will justice ever be served? Also on the show.
Today, the Israeli family is saying goodbye not just to their beloved president, not just to a family member. We are saying goodbye to the head of our family.
Israel mourns the death of former President Shimon Peres, an Israeli leader who shared the Nobel Peace Prize with a Palestinian. To Israelis, a great leader of the nation. To Palestinians, the architect of their oppression. Welcome to the program, everyone. We begin the day with a case of mass murder. The weapon has been identified, and no one is surprised. Today, criminal investigators said flight MH17 was shot down over Ukraine 2 years ago by a Russian missile. The evidence, they say, is overwhelming that the missile was brought from Russia into eastern Ukraine and launched by pro-Russian rebels. Now, Russia immediately dismissed the findings. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman calling the investigation speculation and highly politicized. Well, that means it's highly unlikely that Russia will ever extradite any suspects to face charges connected to the crash. So where does this investigation go from here? In a moment, I'll talk with one of the journalists who pushed the investigation forward and paved the way for what was made public today. Our first report takes us to the fields where MH17 came down in pieces.
The wreckage area spanned kilometers. Hundreds of lives were lost here when Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was shot down from the sky. Now Dutch prosecutors have revealed the missile that brought it down was from Russia. This Buk missile was brought in from the territory of the Russian Federation and after the launch was subsequently returned to the Russian Federation territory. But it's still not known who gave the order to shoot down the plane, whether the assailants acted on their own or responded to a command from superiors. Investigators say they've identified about 100 people who could be linked to the plane's downing. For the relatives, this is a step closer to closure.
Up till now, there were a lot of speculations, but I see this as something really, a big relief for me.
Flight MH17 took off from Amsterdam on July 17, 2014, en route to Kuala Lumpur. Its flight path carried it over eastern Ukraine, where it was blown out of the sky near the town of Hrabove. Last October, a report concluded the plane had been brought down by a Russian-made Buk missile launched from eastern Ukraine. But the investigators stopped short of laying blame on any one side for the incident. Russia and the rebels immediately denied involvement, blaming the Ukrainian government instead.
Well, David Crawford is one of the journalists who uncovered evidence revealing Russia's connection to the crash of MH17. His reporting earned him Germany's highest award for investigative journalism in 2015. He joins us tonight. David, it's good to have you with us here on the show. I want to start with Moscow's reaction to the report today. I mean, we've seen this reaction before, haven't we?
Yes, we have. That Moscow refuses to accept responsibility for the downing of the plane and is pointing its finger at Ukraine.
And if Moscow denies any connection to the crash and refuses to extradite suspects, does the search then for justice, does it basically end with this report that we're getting today?
No. This whole matter is not going to go away. If you look at, for example, the Lockerbie downing of the Pan Am 103, I think it was, over Lockerbie, justice took decades, and this matter won't go away. But it could also take decades before it's finally just too expensive to keep denying it.
Yeah, we want to let's take a look now, David, at a clip from the video that you produced as part of your investigation into the crash. Let's see if we can't roll that clip. Your work, it earned the highest praise in journalism. Do we have that clip? And this is just the beginning of the trailer, David. And let me ask you, did you create the blueprint for the team of investigators who presented their findings today?
Well, what we did was we conducted a thorough investigation, and if you look at how the Dutch led team of investigators worked, they did basically the same thing that we did, but of course they had more people, more resources. We were only able to spend a week on the ground there, and they had 2 years to look into this. Obviously, with better resources, more people, they were able to do a more thorough job. They also had a much bigger responsibility than us. Our job was basically to try and figure out what's going on without damaging evidence on the ground. They had to find the evidence on the ground and take it in a notarized fashion that the courts then that later would look at this would believe that this was evidence that was actually found there on such and such a date and such a condition.
Right.
So taking evidence is a serious matter, and that's what they were doing, whereas we were trying to leave the evidence in place so that we wouldn't damage a future more serious investigation by investigators, because when we were there, they hadn't been there yet.
In your reporting, David, you write that pro-Russian separatists in Donbass, they celebrated the downing, but they thought at first that they had shot down a Ukrainian military jet. I mean, are we talking about mass murder here by mistaken identity?
That's unclear at the moment. What we also said was that it was a very difficult situation on the ground and in the air over eastern Ukraine at that time, where the soldiers on the ground who were manning these missiles were very afraid of the airplanes up in the air, because the airplanes were targeting, first of all, the Buk missile systems, which could be dangerous for them. The people in the air were frightened of the Buk missiles on the ground, and each side knew that whoever shot first had the best chance of survival.
So it was the first to shoot.
It was a situation. The first, and this is a situation where you had very little time to figure out what was going on. I talked to an air flight controller, and he told me that when he started work each day or each shift, he would need 3 to 5 minutes in order just to get a three-dimensional picture of the sky over his head. Whereas I was talking to people who operated Buk missiles, and they said, we have to turn off our radar after 40 seconds because it's too dangerous to leave it on. Yeah. So they're working in very, very small time frames, and it's life and death matter, and it's the life of themselves and their colleagues. So it's a very, very serious matter. People are frightened, and mistakes can be made under these conditions.
All right, David, we're going to have to wrap it up there. David Crawford with the investigative newsroom, corrective.org. David, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us and to offer your analysis. We appreciate it.